Hi, my name is Joan Drinkwin. I'm the coordinator of the Pacific Marine and Estuarine Fish Habitat Partnership, better known as PMEP. PMEP's geographic scope encompasses coastal draining watersheds along the U.S. west coast of Washington, Oregon, and California, extending into offshore marine waters. Within this spatial domain, PMEP focuses its attention on the estuarine and nearshore fish habitats that exist in tidal, subtidal, and marine waters. PMEP has established regional boundaries for the purpose of habitat characterization, information synthesis, outreach, habitat conservation, and restoration goal setting. Our four regions are the Salish Sea, Washington, Oregon, and Northern California coast, Central California, and the Southern California Bight. These regional divides follow watershed and international boundaries and extend out to the 200-meter depth contour, in close alignment with management boundaries in use by U.S. West Coast fisheries managers. This region boasts over 7,800 miles of shorelines and coastal areas. From the historic Native American clam gardens to the multi-million-dollar Pacific oyster industry, from the artisanal gillnet salmon fleet in the Salish Sea to the northern anchovy fleet of California, landing over 22 million pounds in 2019, from the family jigging for smelt to the halibut charter off the coast of Oregon, this area is home to a culturally and economically important tradition of fishing and harvesting food from the sea and estuaries. PMEP's initial work has focused on understanding, protecting, and restoring the habitats necessary to sustain valuable fish resources, especially those special habitats needed during the juvenile life history stages. We direct our NIFHAP funding to projects that restore and assess juvenile fish habitats in our coastal wetlands and estuaries. More recently, we've also embraced an emphasis on restoring tidal connectivity in those habitats to maintain the dynamic exchange of nutrients and sediment and other key components of tidally influenced fish habitats. As it began its work focusing on estuaries, PMEP selected 15 focal species to anchor our work and guide decisions on restoration project funding. These species represent major gills, species of commercial, recreational, and cultural importance, and species whose life histories span all or a significant portion of West Coast estuaries. PMEP began its work by creating an inventory and classification of U.S. West Coast estuaries. This was one of the first studies of its kind, compiling all spatial data sets around estuaries throughout the U.S. West Coast. Following that, we investigated the nursery functions of West Coast estuaries and developed a state of the knowledge for juveniles and focal fish and invertebrate species, in which we identified our 15 focal species and compiled spatial data on nursery functions into a downloadable data set. In 2018, we published a state of the knowledge of eelgrass along the U.S. West Coast, also compiling all available eelgrass spatial data sets into one data set. In 2018, PMEP supported an inventory of historical estuary extent and a study assessing tidal wetland losses. The Tidal Wetland Loss Project documented 85% losses of tidal wetlands along the U.S. West Coast. We also consolidated known tidal wetland restoration projects along the U.S. West Coast and included those in our downloadable spatial data set. Our latest published study focuses on how best to restore eelgrass habitats. PMEP is currently working on a state of the knowledge report, compiling spatial data sets and synthesizing literature on nearshore marine fish habitats. Another very recent project is a collaborative effort with the California Fish Passage Forum and the Pacific Lamprey Conservation Initiative to convene scientific discussion and develop a hub site in ArcGIS Online, exploring the science and data of barriers to tidal connectivity. Key products of these assessments are two online data tools developed for users to both download each of our compiled data sets and to explore them online. The Estuary Explorer allows users to compare data related to different estuaries. The Estuary Viewer includes even more external data sets and allows users to upload their own data for further comparison and restoration planning. All of these tools, projects, and assessments have been funded through our partners, such as the Association of Wildlife Agencies, NOAA, the Nature Conservancy, and Pew Charitable Trusts, leveraging hundreds of thousands of dollars to support NIFHAP work. With NIFHAP funding, PMEP has supported 29 projects, including those FY21 projects recently funded. But rather than me telling you about all of these projects, I'd like to let a few of our project sponsors tell their stories themselves.
Hi, I'm Lexi Bell from the Morro Bay National Estuary Program. We wanted to share with you one of the projects that's been funded by our fish habitat partnership in this region, the Pacific Marine and Estuarine Fish Habitat Partnership. We received a grant from the partnership to help fund our eelgrass restoration and monitoring work here in Morro Bay. This is one of our sites where we collected eelgrass to transplant it farther into the back part of the bay where we've had eelgrass loss for many years. This project will help us restore eelgrass, improve climate resiliency in our bay, and improve water quality.
PMEP contributed to the development and implementation of the Cedar Creek Enhancement Project, which is located in the Elk River watershed on the southern Oregon coast. The Curry Soil and Water Conservation District developed the project to restore geomorphic processes and winter rearing habitat for coho salmon, which led to the reconstruction of 3,600 feet of stream channel and floodway morphology, construction of a bridge that restored fish passage to 2,100 feet of spawning habitat, the installation of in-stream log structures, and the fencing and planting of 8.5 acres of riparian area. PMEP also contributed to the development of a project that will restore fish passage and winter rearing habitat in Swamp Creek, which is a tributary to the Elk River estuary. This summer, we will notch the reservoir dam, shown here, to restore a free-flowing stream channel. And then in 2022, approximately 20 acres of ditched wetland will be restored for winter rearing habitat.
The Yaquina Tidal Wetland Restoration Project, seen here during a king tide after project completion, lowered half of a perimeter dike on a 55-acre site to restore natural sedimentation regimes, filled linear drainage ditches, and excavated 2,400 linear feet of new tidal channels. Fill was utilized on site to create ecotone slopes to support scrub, shrub, and spruce swamp vegetation. Over 200 pieces of large woody debris were installed to create habitat structure and function, and measures were taken to protect the City of Toledo's source water pipe. PMEP-funded mapping was used extensively in the planning and design phase of the project, and PMEP funding was vital to complete the on-the-ground work. This project restored more complete tidal flow, enhanced native wetland vegetation productivity, expanded habitat for rearing salmonids and other fish and wildlife species, and boosted the resiliency of this wetland habitat to climate change and sea level rise.
PMEP is fortunate to have engaged and enthusiastic partners on our steering, science and data, and communications committees who regularly step up with funding and regularly volunteer for additional work on our proposal review panel and project working groups. We're lucky to have over 30 official partners from federal, tribal, and state agencies, academia, non-governmental organizations, and the private sector.